Hi everybody, welcome to CAD in Black. In this tutorial I'm going to explain you very important tips in Autocad that I think they will be useful for you. Following the previous videos, here I also compiled tips from other tutorials, but I created new ones, so I am explaining some topics for the first time. Also, don't forget to have a look in the description to the list of contents, and you can have direct access to the topic that you want to watch. Okay, let's start the lesson. Tips about using the Object Snap. Object Snap is a function to allow us to make our drawings with precision. However, it's very common that non-experienced users struggle in some situations. And in this tutorial, we are going to have a closer look at some of them. First tip, turn on only the snap modes that you are going to use. If you click on this arrow, you can see all the modes that we can use. What happens if I switch on all of them? This is a thing I don't recommend, because it can be more confusing as more points to snap will appear on the screen, and not to mention that your computer can slow down a little bit. Tip 2. Just switch on the nearest mode when you are going to use it. This mode is useful when we want to connect a line to another object, especially when that point doesn't need to be accurate. Now, suppose I want to draw this line here. I have the endpoint. I'm going to drag to the right, and I can see the nearest mode appearing while I wanted to show the extension mode. It looks like Autocad is switching between both. If I insert, for example, 2 meters, sometimes it works, while other times it won't. This is what happens when the modes overlap. And that's why I prefer to turn off the modes that I'm not using. As nearest, I only need it rarely, I can switch it off. Now look at another example. The nearest mode is off, and I want a line to start intersected with this line more or less here. As you can notice, the cursor snaps to the endpoint or to the midpoint on both sides. What I can do instead is hovering this endpoint, drag to the left slowly, and when I click, the new line will start where I am. Issues in noticing the hatch pattern. Sometimes I want to fill an object with hatch. So let's click on the command. Then click here and select this brick pattern. Then I'm going to fill this surface, and as you can see, everything is white. This thing often happens when the hatch scale is too big or too small. I need to change it here. And as in this example the distance is 3.3, maybe I need a smaller number than 1. Let's try 0.01. I think it's not enough. Maybe even smaller, 0.002. Now I can see it better. So basically you have to play with these numbers to find the scale that you want. Dynamic input. The dynamic input is this box showing up next to the cursor when I type anything with the keyboard. Also, when I am drawing objects, I can see the length of this line that I'm making. If you cannot see anymore that input on your screen, you might have turned it off by mistake. How to solve this? Click on the last icon at the corner, Customization, add the Dynamic Input option on your status bar, and finally, we have to turn it on again. Selection cycling. Sometimes in a project, it's common to draw objects directly over lines or other kind of drawings. Then, when we try to select the object, Autocad needs to guess which object to pick up. Another example. Here I have a polyline, which is hiding a line below. If I try to select the line, it's not working as it selects the polyline. So that's why Autocad has the selection cycling. It's this button on the status bar. Now go again with the pointer to the same place and you can see this symbol of two squares in the screen. This means there are overlapping objects here. I can decide to choose either the polyline or the line which is below. As you can see, this is a setting that I recommend to use. Layout tabs extra tips. When we set a viewport to show a specific drawing with a specific scale, we realize that in a small distraction we scroll the mouse wheel and it messes up all the scale. And then I have to go to the scale list and click again, in this case in 1/150. However, there is a very useful tool here. I can lock the viewport by clicking on this icon. Now, even I am in the model space, I can zoom or move in the same way as I was in the paper mode. By the way, I can still draw or erase objects inside the viewport. So I just recommend you to lock all the viewports when you don't want to change them anymore. Write text and draw the title block on the paper. When you need to add text to your papers, just draw it directly in the paper mode. I mean outside of any viewport. It's easier and more practical. First, it's text that we don't want to model, as it's only used for annotation. Second, the size that we specify is the paper height. In this case 5 mm, and I don't have to scale it like in a model space. Much easier. The same applies for the title block. Just draw it on the paper. You can start drawing the borders, then the text using the paper height. In this case, after placing the first single line text, I want 4 of these with the same spacing. I can use here the command copy, then the option array. I type 4, and finally you can click again to confirm the position or insert a specific distance between objects. And then just change the names to the right ones. Okay, I can take the opportunity to explain to insert an image to the layout. For example, if you want to add a logo of your company there, it's quite simple. Go to the Insert tab, then click on Attach and select an image to import to this file. I select the Cat in Black logo, for example, just to show you how it works. We can insert the coordinates of the insertion point or specify it on screen, and that's what I'm going to do. Click on OK, place the start point. I can click around here. Then it looks like that the image is a bit large, but that's fine. Just press Enter for now, as we can scale it after with a reference. Use the command Scale. Select the image. Click for the base point. Choose the option Reference at the command bar, and then choose 2 points of a reference line to resize it. And this time I will not insert any length, because I don't know it. I just move the cursor in this direction and you can see a dynamic preview of the logo. As soon as it looks great, I can click to place it there. So simple, isn't it? Yes, let's continue. Now we are going to learn to add more viewports on the same paper. Usually the purpose of doing this is to show different drawings or a specific detail that we want to show on a smaller scale. Let's go to the Layout tab on the ribbon. Here we will create a new viewport by clicking in this icon. And there are 3 ways: rectangular, polygonal and object. Let's go for rectangular. So I simply draw a rectangle here. Then I double click inside it to switch to the model space. This time we will use a custom view that we created in the previous chapter. I click on top, go to Custom Model View and choose Detail 1. And look how useful this can be, not need to search for that part, so easy. Next, I go to the scale list and I need to choose one. 1/50. And the reason that I decided to use this scale is because 1/50 is the same as 0.02, which is relatively close to the value that I've got here. And you can see that the drawing didn't change that much. Double click to switch to the paper space and readjust the viewport by clicking on the grip star. And don't forget to lock the viewport to not move it again. After, I can copy this text and place it below our new viewport. Select the text. I'm going to use this endpoint as my base point, and then click in this corner for the second point to keep the same spacing towards the viewport. And rename it with the correct text. Put also the scale of 1/50. Then let's draw a circle here. The radius doesn't need to be precise. On the Layout tab, choose now the option to create a viewport from an existing object, this one. Then click on the circle to convert it to a viewport. And of course, this option only works for enclosed areas. Then suppose what I want here is to zoom this specific part. Move the circle to a specific layer if you want, or put the object just in a specific color. And then I can draw a small circle in the same place of the floor plan to indicate that this area belongs there. And if you want at the end, you can connect it with lines. Useful tips to insert dimension lines in your projects. Let's have this drawing as our example. We will learn how to set a unique layer only to place dimensions, and you will see that it's easy. I'm going to the Layer Properties Manager, and let's create here a new layer called Dimension Lines. Then I set the color as white, for example. So by default, when we draw a dimension line, I automatically place it in our current layer. If I draw a dimension line now, I'm placing it on the layer car park. Okay, now let's switch to the tab Annotate in the ribbon. On the Dimensions panel, I can see this label here that says Use Current. Here is where I decide in which layer the dimension lines are automatically placed. Basically, with this option, we put the dimension lines on the current layer. Instead, what I usually need is to choose a specific layer just for the dimension lines. I'm going to switch to the Home tab, and then, even if our current layer is this one boundary, and I create an align dimension here, you can see this time it's on the dimensions layer. Continue and baseline. On the next example, suppose I want to add more dimension lines to measure the remaining distances along this side. Instead of creating dimensions one by one, there is a very useful tool that can save you considerable time if you are working on a huge project. The Continue dimension. First, I'm going to draw a vertical dimension here. Then, I'm going to push this button that says Continue. And suddenly, it looks like I'm making another dimension in the same direction as the last one that I created here. So, as you can see, it's easy to place several dimensions by just clicking on the points that we want. When you finish, just press Escape. I also want to explain you a tip. As this command defaults to continue the last dimension, I need to click on Select to change to a different dimension line. For example, I click in this one if I want to continue it to the right, for example. Below the button Continue, we can find the baseline. With this feature, we can make several dimension lines measuring a distance from the same point. Also, look that the precedent is the same as for the Continue command. However, there is a specification that's a bit different. The spacing between each line must be defined on the Dimension Style Manager. I'm going to modify the current style, Internal Measures, and on the line section, we can change the baseline spacing. Let's increase it a little bit to 5. And then click on OK. OK, nothing has changed here. In fact, the new spacing only applies for the next dimensions that I will draw. I'm going to delete them and repeat baseline again, and look that the spacing is a bit wider than before. Another tip regarding baselines is about the position of the dimension. It's curious that if the pointer is below the line and the text, the new dimension will stay above it. And if I move the cursor to the other side, you can see that I'm switching the position of this new dimension line. Create a template with your preferred dimension styles. Imagine that I'm very happy with this dimension style, and I want to use it in all my future projects, at least the similar ones. So we can add this style to a personalized template for each new project. I'm going to show you. Let's open a new file, and this window showed up with the template folder. You can use a default one or a personal template that you might created before. In this example, I'm going to use this one, my default template. Here, I had previously set up my units, added layers, and configured the layouts with title blocks. I did this to avoid repeating this process in every new project. And what about the dimension styles? As I want to import the internal measures from the other file. There is a very nice command here, the Design Center, and it is located on the View tab. So, in the Design Center we can import content from other files such as blocks, layers, text styles, etc. and along with them the dimension styles. This is simple. Just search for your file in the folder list, double-click on Dim Styles, and double-click again in the style that you want to import. In this case, internal measures. So it's done. And finally, you can confirm it here in this tab for the dimension styles. Here it is. Finally, don't forget to update your template on Save As, Drawing Template, and replace the existing file. Dimension break. Have a look at this example where you can see some dimension lines intersecting each other. In order to avoid them appearing as normal lines, we can add dimension breaks at their intersections. The icon is this one, and the way this works is really simple. I just need to click on a dimension line, press Enter, and the break is added automatically at each intersection. Now let's activate the command again. Another way to access it is by typing dim break. And this time I select the dimension 600, and as you can see I broke it at these two dimension lines, but stays continuous at this point, because a break is already added in the previous dimension. Also, breaks apply to any kind of objects that the dimension line intersects. And to show you this, I'm going to repeat the command in this drawing where this dimension line intersects those circles. Look, there is a break in all the intersections. To edit the break size, I just need to go to the Dimension Style Manager, modify the style Dims for exercises, the current one, go to the tab Symbols and Arrows, and at the bottom you can see the section for the dimension break where I can change the break size. As an example, I'm going to set 10, click on OK, and now as you can see the gap has increased. Dimension space. At the right of the icon Dim Break, we can find Dim Space. When the dimensions are not well organized, or we just want to set the same spacing between different levels, we can use this command. The process is the following. First, I need to choose the base dimension, which is the one that will not move. Then I pick the dimension to space. Let's select this one with 200 mm of length. Press Enter, and then I can type a value or set an automatic spacing. If I press Enter again, you can see the second dimension goes down, and now the spacing between both matches the extension lines of the first dimension. Okay, now I'm going to undo this pressing Ctrl Z and repeat the command again. I select the same base dimension, but this time I pick up these two. I use again the auto spacing, and now the three levels are separated equally. Let's go back one last time. I'm going to do exactly the same, but now instead of automatic, let's type a specific distance. For reference, I can look at that small dimension of 20 mm, so let's put the spacing a bit wider. I think 30 is fine. Now this is how it looks like. Create a jog dimension. This new example has a section at the right which is long enough to not fit in a paper. And this representation means that this length is larger than what it looks like here. So I'm going to add a dimension line, but this time let's use the tool Continue. Then pick up this last dimension and place this new one here. Now the length of this dimension line is 300 mm. However, the real size of that section is 1500. To represent that, I need to add a jog dimension. The button is located here. And this is simple. First I click on the button, then select the dimension line and click exactly in the place where you want to add the jog. Now to replace the current measurement, I can simply double-click on the text and change the value to 1500. Basically, what I'm doing here is adding a text override, and it can be either as a text, numbers, or both. Finally, select the dimension, click with the right button, go to Quick Properties, and there I can see the real measurement of the dimension, which I cannot change it, is 300, and the current text override. Now, to display the real dimension length again, you can just erase the text override. On the next part of this video, I will share with you great tips to master lines and polylines. There are several features we can edit in a polyline, and we are going to start with close. To explain you this situation, I'm going to use this example where we are going to draw this simple figure with the command polyline. You will see that what matters here is the way we will draw the last line. Let's activate the command polyline. As you may know, I can click on the icon at the ribbon, or a faster way is using its alias. Just type PL and press Enter. Then I'm going to draw this irregular polygon, and let's make it beautifully starting at the same horizontal plane. First, make sure Object Snap and Ortho Mode are on. The snaps are off. Let's turn them on. I'm going to hover this endpoint, drag to the right following this track line, and then I type 200 mm to start a polyline at that distance from the corner. Then I draw each line by typing the exact length with the keyboard. And to make the things easier for you, you can just look at the left drawing as all the dimension lines are there. Also, notice as we are in ortho mode, all the lines snap vertically or horizontally. And in this way, we can draw all the lines much faster. I'm going to speed up the process. And when I arrive at the last line, I'm going to finish the polyline normally by clicking at the end point. What happens is, if I'm using the grips to modify the figure, by trying to move the line at the bottom a bit down, where we should click on this grip at the middle, you can see it separates from the last line. In contrast, what happens if I try to do the same in these other segments? Look. However, let's go back. When we want to join the last line with the start point, we can click on close or typing CL, and this time I basically remove any start and last point from the polyline, and the lines no longer break at the origin. Now I'm going to select the polyline and right-click with the mouse. Let's go towards polyline, and there are several settings that we can do here. If I click on open, look what has happened. The last segment that I inserted just disappeared, leaving the polyline open. Instead, if I click on close, I get back to a closed polyline exactly how it was before. With the options at the bottom, I basically convert the polyline into a spline. If I choose Curve Fit, you get this result, and it's exactly like drawing this figure using the spline fit command. On the other hand, if I convert the polyline to spline fit, it uses the method of drawing the spline CV command. I know it sounds a bit counterintuitive, but CV actually means control vertices. In the same menu related with the polylines, we can add a width in case we want to represent that polyline a bit thicker comparing with the other objects in this drawing. Then we are prompted to insert a value. Because I have these dimensions here as a reference, I can guess more or less how the new thickness will look like. Let's insert 10. And it should be more or less this distance. Type 10, press enter, and here you have the result. One characteristic when you add a width to a polyline is when you select it, the grips are located at an imaginary line in the middle. To get back to the previous state, I go again to width, but this time I'm going to type 0 to disable this property. Convert lines in a single polyline. Sometimes we are just drawing something, and only after finishing we realize that we have been using the command line instead of polyline. That's fine, and there is no need to draw everything again, of course. There is a command for that, the command join. You can find it here on the Modify panel. That's simple. Select all the objects and they convert to a single polyline. Line types. A lot of Autocad users have encountered problems when dealing with line types. In addition, the way they appear in the workspace can be very different than in viewports on the layout tabs. All that strolling is due to the line type scale. So, in this tutorial we are going to explore this step by step, hoping this won't be a big issue for you. Back on the same drawing, we are going to create a new layer here. Let's name it dash lines. And set a different color, for example this light blue one. Next, I select the drawing at the right and change it to the new layer. On the Layer Properties Manager, there is a column about line types. Let's change the line type for this layer. And first I have to load a new one. And as you can see, there are lots of them that AutoCAD provides by default. I select this ISO-space, then don't forget to select it also here, click on OK and close. As you can see, the lines in that blue layer are now dashed. Now, there isn't any control to set a measure of each dash or to set the quantity of dashes within a line. That would be very hard to measure, but what we can do instead is set the line type scale. Now, in Autocad, we can set a line type scale for a specific object, or we can apply it generally for all the file, and in that case, all the lines that are not continue change their appearance. So, to set the general line type scale, I type LT scale and press enter. The default value, as you can see, is 1, and this drawing has the dashes with this size. If I change the scale to 0.5, you can see the dash sizes are now half smaller. If I am not happy with the result, I can keep changing until I find the size that works for me. So, at this moment it doesn't look hard, but suppose now I draw a line very large in comparison with the existing objects. What happens here is, with the same line type scale, I cannot see anything. As I don't want to modify the other dash lines, I can do a different process. Select the line and go to Properties. And here you can see a setting for the line type scale. By changing this value, and this time I'm going to try a very huge one, for example 50, and let's see. Finally, I can see the dashes properly without changing the lines that I have in the exercise that I showed you before. Now let's go back. But they seem to change. Okay, this is actually just a problem of loading the screen. Usually if you zoom the screen few times, we'll solve this problem. But in this kind of situations, the best is to use the command regenerate. And now the dashes are visible again. How to draw with the grid and snap mode. Grid and snap mode can be useful when we have to make detailed drawings, especially when they have regular shapes. Let's have a look at them. The first icon at the status bar enables the grid, as you can see here. Try it on your computer. However, you will probably notice that it looks darker than here if you have the default colors. For me, they are a bit hard to see, and that's why I prefer to change them. But okay, this I will explain to you at the end of this chapter. For now, let's zoom a bit and activate the drawing command, for example, line. You can see that the cursor doesn't snap to any point, because the snap mode is off. Let's turn it on, and now yes, you can click on an intersection of the grid line. So it's easily understandable that these tools work together, and there is no point to turn on the snap mode if your grid mode is off. Now, I'm going to click on an intersection of two major lines, and by moving the cursor, you can understand what is the length between 2 points of the grid. It's 10, and the distance of two major lines is 50, because it's equal to 5 minor lines. So, as you can see, this is quite simple. Now have a look to this drawing. We can easily guess the distance between some points, if they are not that far away. For example, this distance is 100 millimeters, and the width of the rectangle is 200. Because there are 4 big squares, 5, 10, 15, 20, you can just count them. So to draw that rectangle with the grid is actually easy. This is the first corner, then the opposite will be 4 large squares to the left and 1 above the line at the bottom, so click there. You can zoom a bit to make sure that you click on the correct point, it's better. Okay, now let's learn to edit the snap and grid spacing. Click on Snap Settings to modify those values. It's in the first tab of the drawing settings window here. Of course, to snap only in every point of the grid, the snap spacing and grid spacing must match. Don't forget this. And the values that I have now are the settings that I used in the previous example. Suppose we set 5 for snap spacing, but leave 10 mm for the grid spacing. The result is this. And it can actually be a good method. Because with the same grid, I can have the center of each square as an extra point to snap, as you can see. To have a different x and y spacing, I need to uncheck equal x and y spacing. And then I set the values. Here I have 5 mm for y distance and 10 for the x distance. I can also change the length of the major lines. The higher the value, the easier to measure larger distances. If I'm zooming out the workspace, at one point the grid resizes, in a way that the lines won't get that close. We couldn't see anything if that would happen. This means that at this moment the spacing here is not what we put on the settings. Be careful, don't draw anything now. Always draw in the maximum zoom. And in the case that you want to draw bigger objects, simple. Just change the spacing settings to bigger values. If I like to have the workspace more organized and I want a point to be in the corner of an intersection when I zoom out a lot, like where I am now, simple. Place the cursor there, in the corner, and zoom in slowly, keeping the cursor in the same position. When the grid doesn't resize anymore, it means that the grid is now resized correctly. Change the grid colors. As I told you previously, the default grid colors are dark. But I understand their point. We don't want the workspace to look a mess with the grid on, especially when we have lots of layers with different colors, like in the example here. But I think that putting the grid a bit lighter, it doesn't interfere that much. So let's learn to do it. To edit the colors, we have to access the Options menu. Then I go to the Display tab and click on this button that says Colors. Here we can change the color of each element on the workspace. You can see a big list here. Also, they are grouped by context. It's the list on the left. Now it says that we are at a 2D model space. So I am happy with most of the Autocad interface colors. So I don't need to change them, except the grid, which is a bit dark for me. To change a color, click on the element, go to Color, choose one from the list or click here to pick a different one. Let's say I want it a bit green, but in a grey style. I keep the cursor here, and then I drag this rectangle, to choose the proper color, a bit up, to be more visible, and click on OK. It's done. Now I need to change the grid minor lines. To do it, I choose the same color. Then I click again and pick up a color so the cursor will be in the same position. This is good if you just want to change the color a bit and to not look very different. So I want to put the selector a bit darker, then click on OK. I apply and close the window, and now it looks more visible. So you can just choose a color that will be comfortable for you. Now let's have a look at the shortcut menu, the one that we can open with the right button of the mouse. Actually, most of these functions are icons located on panels in the ribbon, but sometimes it can be easier for us doing this way. Now I will make a quick introduction of what you can find here. The first option over there repeats the last command used. It's an alternative way of just pressing enter when we don't have any command active. I actually prefer to just press enter, it's much easier. Then there is a list of the last commands used. On the clipboard, we find the basic tools to copy, move or cut objects to a different file. And this still works by just pressing the classic shortcuts, like the Ctrl+C, Ctrl+V and so on. For example, I will copy these objects, press Enter, then I go to a different file, and just click on Paste. And they will be copied exactly in the same position as they were before. But if you wanted to copy this door straight, you can use the method that I just showed you previously, by moving the UCS coordinates to the corner, then rotate the x-axis in line of the edge of the door, and repeat the process. Press Ctrl+C, and then paste it in the other drawing. And now it's straight. Back in the shortcut menu, I want to show you some options that I use quite often, like Isolate Objects. I'm going to select this part, and then I click on Isolate Objects, and you notice that all the other drawings disappeared. To revert these changes, just click on End Object Isolation. In the same submenu, there is also Hide Objects, which will be the opposite. If there are parts that you are not using at the moment, you can hide them temporarily. A bit down the list, there are the options to use the pen, zoom, or the steering wheels. Then there is the Quick Select, Quick Calculator, also available on the ribbon, and the Options menu. Also, don't forget that when you select objects, that menu is different, and depends the kind of object that you select. For example, in a block, you get options to edit a block, reset a block if you modify it, or edit a block in place if you don't want to open the block editor. Then you find the basic commands to modify objects, so it's also possible to access them from this list. Then there is the draw order, and this one I use a lot. When you create a new layer, Autocad puts the objects of that layer above everything that was created before. For example, here I created the layer for the dimension lines after the layer for the walls. And because I don't like these extension lines above the walls, let's sweep the order. And for that I need to select all the objects of the layer dimensions. And I can do it from the Quick Select, choose the layer DLI and click OK. Now that all the dimensions are selected, I can go again to the right-click menu, go to Draw Order and choose Send to Back. And look that the walls are now visible when they overlap dimensions. Another tool I sometimes use is Group Objects. Let's say I want to group this floor plan, but without the dimensions. Turn off the layer DLI. Then I select everything and from the menu choose Group. And I could move or copy this house elevation to a different place. Select Similar. This is a quick way for selecting objects of the same type and with the same properties. For example, let's go to this line. Click with the right button and now go to Select Similar. As you can see, all the lines in the layer EB shell are now in the selection. Now let's do the same thing but for one of these violet lines. Go to Select Similar, and this time I select instead all the lines located on the layer EB4. Next, suppose now we want to hide these doors temporarily from the project. After clicking on one of them, right-click, select Similar, and now you can see that all the references for this same block are selected. Now to isolate these doors, we have to right-click, go to Isolate and then click on Hide Objects. When you want to bring the doors back, just use the right button anywhere on the screen and this time click on End Object Isolation. Okay, Now I want to show you a few examples where I find it useful and quick the option select similar. For example, the name of these people are text objects located in the layer employee. If I decide later to increase the text height a little bit, for example, I can use select similar, go to properties, and change the text height here to, for example, 12 inches. Okay, this is the result. But let's put it half. 6 inches. Now it's better. Another example. The number that you can see here in all the offices is located in the layer 0. Now I want to put this in a different layer. Let's create a new one called desk number. Now to move all these blocks to this new layer, it's again the same process. Just click on one, select similar, and finally I can just change the layer here. Object Snap Overrides has a useful tool that not a lot of people know. Suppose we are drawing a line here, and we want to connect it perpendicular with the diagonal line below. As you see, it's only showing up the midpoint and the end point. But if I click with the right button, I can see Object Snap Overrides, I go there, and I can choose a different mode. In this case, I click on perpendicular, and now you can see the symbol appearing. Just click on it to make those lines orthogonal to each other. You can try the other modes by yourself, for example nearest, or on the top you can create a temporary track point or choose the middle between 2 points. This is how it works. I choose 2 points and it selects the middle distance between them. So just explore the other modes, maybe you find some useful for you, as long as the other options from the shortcut menu. Change the position of the UCS. Look at this situation. Here I want to draw these objects in reference to the diagonal wall. It would be hard to draw them accurately if I use the UCS coordinates on the position by default. You can see that while I'm trying to draw that line, I don't have any reference to draw it perpendicular to the wall. But no problem, because I can make the things easier by just rotating the UCS coordinates. I go to the icon, click on it, I place it in this corner, and then, clicking on the x-axis, I align it to this diagonal line. Then I can switch to ortho mode, and you can see that I can easily draw vertical and horizontal lines according to the new UCS position. Also, if I want to insert a block now, it automatically rotates. And the same happens with the grid. Then to restore the original UCS, which is the WCS, Word Coordinate System, just click on the icon and then select Word. How to change the color of a block. This is a tricky thing in Autocad and a common question for beginners. Consider this figure. We are going to convert this to a block. That's easy. On the block panel, we need to click on Create, create the block, type a name to the block, for example block 1, press Enter. Then we have to assign an intersection point and select the objects. The block is done, and this window is now a single object. Now, if you have noticed, I was in the layer lines when I created this block. Now suppose that later I want to change this window to the layer dimensions. Which color is yellow? You can see that the block hasn't changed any property and it's still white. So how can I avoid this? For me, the best option is, before creating the block, change the color of the objects to by block here. Then we repeat all the steps again. And when the block is done, The color is what I set on properties. Now the color is changing because at this moment it's respecting the color of the layer. If I want a different color, just choose from this list and you can see now it's working. Insert blocks from other drawings. If you click on Insert on the block panel, you can see here the blocks that I have in this file. Now imagine that you want to import a block that you created in another project. This is possible, and it's here on Blocks from Libraries. In this window, we can import blocks that we have in another files. First, click on Browse for a file, this button. In this window, we have to choose our file, and let's choose one from the samples. Click on the tab, and usually they are located here, on Program Files, Autodesk, Autocad, Sample, EN US. Now I'm going to open the folder Design Center and choose, for example, this kitchens file. Wait a little bit, and all the blocks are loaded on the Libraries tab. I'm going to choose a microwave, just click on it, and now I can place it in my drawing. Then I'm going to insert another one, this oven, and if you look, if I change the layer, the block reference changed the colors as well. Purge. We use this function to erase named items that we create in this file. Examples of these are blocks, layers, dimension styles, text styles, and so on. I'm going to show you. In this example of a floor plan, this is from the sample files, let's select this chair. Then, as you can see from the block list, this is a block named Chair 7. Go back to the workspace, and with this block reference selected, I'm going to click with the right button and push Select Similar. With this, I'm selecting all the block references of the same block located in the same layer. Basically all the chairs. Now press delete. As you can see, I don't have these chairs anymore in the workspace, but the block is still stored in this file. Here there isn't any function to delete the block. So how can I get rid of it? The solution is the Purge function. Type PU with the keyboard, or if you want to find the icon, it's on the Manage tab here. Now, in this window, first make sure you have these options selected, purgeable items. On the list at the left, the categories that I can expand have at least one item that I can purge. Now this is important. If an item is purgeable, means that it doesn't have references on the workspace. As I deleted all the chairs, I can purge this block, click on Purge Checked Items, purge this item, and as I also have the layers category checked, I can purge the layers without objects in the workspace, which in this situation, it's only the layer chairs. Close the window. Now if you go to the block list, the chair 7 is not there anymore, and the same happens with the layer chairs. Overkill. When we are creating our projects, it's a common thing that some objects overlap others. Like here, when I added this lift to this floor plan. If the project is big and we have lots of duplicated objects, the file can increase its size. But don't worry, because there is a simple tool in Autocad to solve this. Overkill. Let's type OV. Press Enter. Now I'm going to select the objects. Enter again, and this window appeared. There are several settings to help Autocad decide what kind of duplicated objects we want. For now, let's keep this by default and click on OK. As you can see, now I only have one line here, and the rectangle below was converted to a polyline with only 2 segments. Now let's go back. This time, I'm going to select the rectangle and change the color to this orange. Let's repeat the Overkill command. The icon is located on the Manage tab in the Cleanup panel. Select all the objects, click on OK, and you can see that the rectangle didn't break because it was in a different color. Basically, by default, Autocad doesn't delete duplicate objects if the properties are different. For example, the color, if they are in different layers, different line types, and so on. However, I can ignore one of these properties. Let's suppose this time I ignore the color, and look, the rectangle was converted in a 2-segment polyline as before, even the color was different. Then there are other options you can try. For example, you can choose to not break polylines. But in this case it didn't change a lot. Another interesting command in Autocad is this one, Laywalk. As the name suggests, is a way to walk across the different layers. As you can see, this helps us to visualize the objects that we have in each layer. Here, all the layers in blue are visible on the workspace. If I hold Ctrl and click in these 2 layers, I add them to the selection and consequently I can view their objects. Next, click with the right button. I'm going to clear the selection. Now I can select the layer that I want to see, or hold Ctrl to select more than one. When I close the window, I have 2 options. I can restore all the layers if this box is checked, or if I remove the tick, I keep them exactly how it is now. Working with grips. Grips are a great way to modify objects. In this tutorial, I'm going to explain the basics, and then you have to practice a lot in your computer, so you will get comfortable with this technique with the time. Now let's have these objects as an example. I'm going to select a line, and as you can see, there are 3 grips, 2 at the endpoints and 1 at the middle. If I select this endpoint, I will change the position of this last point. Consequently, the line length can change, but the opposite endpoint stays in the original place. This is important. Now, a useful and common thing to do here is changing the length of the line by moving the cursor along the track line. Now, if I type a value, I will add that to the total length. As before the line measures 1 foot, if I type ½ inch and press enter, you can see that if I double click on the line to see the quick properties, the total length is 1 foot and ½ inch. Let's go back, and this time, instead of typing the value, I press tab and I switched the input value to the total length. If you look at the dashed line, you can understand the coverage of that distance. Let's type 2 feet, and this is the new length of the line. Now, let's go to this rectangle. Here there are 2 kinds of grips. The ones at the corners, and then the ones in the middle of each edge. With the grips on the corners, I can change the position of that point, but all the 3 corners remain in the same place. Basically, I'm deforming the figure. If I click on a grip at the middle, I can stretch the rectangle or even deforming it, but this line remains in the same direction. If I type a value right now, I add that distance to the width in this case. If I click in this one, I can change the height. The grips on a circle are in the 4 quadrants and in the center. The grip on the center is used to move the circle. And on the others, I can change the radius. Now, if you pay attention, I'm going to change the total radius if I type a number now. To increase or decrease the radius, In that case, I need to press tab and now type the number that I wish. That's all in this video. Please feel free to visit my page on Patreon, where you can support this channel if you're happy, of course, and there you can also get access to the exercise files. I would really appreciate that, even of course, I'm already grateful that you find these videos useful for you. So, thank you very much and see you on the next